What's the creepiest thing that you've seen other families do that they accept as totally normal? I met the Patterson family when I was 13 through our church youth group. They had 4 daughters, all spaced about 2 years apart. Rebecca was the oldest at 17, then came Sarah at 15, then Emma, who was my age, and the youngest was Lily at 11. The first thing I noticed about them was their hair. All 4 girls had hair down past their waists, thick and long and always braided or tied back. Rebecca's nearly reached her knees when she let it down. I remember thinking it was pretty, but also kind of impractical, especially during the summer heat when we'd all be outside for youth group activities. Emma and I became friends pretty quickly. We liked the same books and had the same sarcastic sense of humor that got us in trouble during Bible study when we'd make each other laugh at inappropriate times. After a few months of hanging out at church, she invited me over for dinner on a Friday night. I showed up at their house around 6 with a container of cookies my mom had made. Mrs. Patterson answered the door with a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes and welcomed me in. The house was immaculate. Everything in its place, the kind of clean that felt more anxious than comfortable. Dinner was pot roast with potatoes and carrots, and Mr. Patterson said grace while we all held hands around the table. Then everyone started eating in complete silence. At first I thought maybe they were just quiet eaters, so I kept my mouth shut and focused on my food. But after a few minutes, I couldn't stand it anymore. The silence felt suffocating, so I did what any normal 13-year-old would do at a dinner table with their friend's family. I started talking. I asked Mr. Patterson about his job. I complimented Mrs. Patterson on the pot roast. I told Emma about something funny that happened at school that week. Just normal dinner conversation stuff. Except nobody responded. They all just stopped eating and stared at me. Emma's eyes went wide. Sarah dropped her fork and it clattered against her plate. Rebecca looked down at her lap like she wanted to disappear. Lily's mouth hung open slightly. Mr. and Mrs. Patterson exchanged a look across the table that I couldn't read. I stopped mid-sentence, a bite of potato halfway to my mouth, suddenly aware that I'd done something terribly wrong but having no idea what it was. Mrs. Patterson cleared her throat and said very quietly, "We don't talk during meals in this house." I apologized immediately, my face burning with embarrassment. The rest of dinner passed in that same oppressive silence, with me trying to chew as quietly as possible and avoid making eye contact with anyone. The only sounds were forks scraping plates and the occasional clink of a glass being set down. After dinner, Emma and I went up to her room and she finally explained. Her mom had this fear of one of them choking to death at the dinner table. Apparently when Sarah was little, she'd been laughing at something during dinner and had coughed on a piece of chicken. Mrs. Patterson had completely panicked, even though Sarah was fine after a few seconds. From that day forward, talking at dinner was banned. It had been that way for almost 10 years. Then Emma told me about the hair thing. None of the Patterson girls were allowed to cut their hair until they turned 16. Mrs. Patterson had gotten a bad haircut when she was 14 and apparently still regretted it decades later. So she decided her daughters would have to wait until they were old enough to make a mature decision about their hair. Rebecca had just turned 17 and had finally been allowed to get her first real haircut a few months earlier. Emma showed me a picture on her phone. Rebecca had cut off nearly 2 feet of hair and looked absolutely thrilled in the photo, but Emma said their mom had cried for 2 days afterward. I asked Emma if she was going to cut her hair when she turned 16. She said she didn't know. She'd had long hair for so long that she couldn't really imagine herself any other way. Plus, she knew how upset it would make her mom, and it was easier to just keep it long than deal with the guilt trip. I went home that night and told my mom about the silent dinners and the hair rule. She just shook her head and said every family has their quirks, but I knew this was different. This wasn't quirky. This was control wrapped up in fear and passed off as protection. I stayed friends with Emma through high school, but I never went back for dinner at her house again.